the previous videos, we have mentioned about the retractions of articles. There are three ways that an article can be retracted. First is due to the request of the authors themselves. Second is due to the decisions by the editors-in-chief or the publisher. And the third one is due to the complaint of the research communities. We know that there is a reasons for the retractions of the articles, and normally the journals will clearly state the reason that the articles being retracted. It was also mentioned that the papers being retracted is not necessarily due to unethical conducts. However, we know that most of the cases will be related to unethical conducts. In these videos, we're going to discuss about various reasons of the retractions of articles, which is classified in accordance to the requester, the authors, the editors-in-chief, and also the research communities. First, we look at the author as the requester for the retractions of the paper. This happens when the authors detected significant errors which can lead to unjustified conclusions. This is an example statement that you can find from the journals when the papers is being retracted. It sounds like this. The authors have recognized that an equation is incorrect and its modifications will affect what result as a consequences. These results and discussions presented cannot therefore be appropriately justified. In another word, in this case, the author found an error in one of their equations, and by correcting these equations, it will lead to totally different results as a consequence. And such result will lead to different directions in terms of the discussions and finding, and subsequently will deviate from the conclusions that was initially made. Therefore, in order to avoid confusions or giving wrong informations, the authors themselves requested the papers to be retracted. Personally, I feel this reason is acceptable, and this is considered as an ethical practice by the authors, where they only realize about the errors after the papers being published, and in order to prevent misleading to the research community, they decided the papers to be retracted. With that, personally, I will pay respect to the authors who are brave enough to face their own error and willing to admit their errors. The second case is due to the disagreement among the authors over the authorships or the contents. The statement sounds like this. Due to insurmountable scientific disagreement over the authorships and sections, in the linked first part of this article, which have also been retracted. Based on the statement here, there are two issues. First is due to the scientific disagreement among the authorships, and second is due to a section which is linked to the first part of this article. Some articles may appear in part 1 and part 2, being published as two papers in the journal, which was also being retracted. The third one is due to the misleading findings. These are the example statements given by the journal. They, that means the authors, realize that the work of the published study have not been fully completed, and they discovered a few new results after the publications of this paper. In order not to confuse or mislead the readers, they decided to retract this paper. This case is similar to the first case here, where they realize that the works is not fully completed and they have met the conclusions too early. Now that the papers has already been published, they discover a few new results which can lead to different findings, and in order not to confuse or mislead the reader, they decided to retract the paper. Another example due to the request of the authors are the plagiarisms of improper citations. The authors themselves have found that they have not appropriately cited the papers that have already appeared in a journals, and normally the details of the articles are provided. Next, let us look at the requester as the editors-in-chief. The editors-in-chief decided the articles to be retracted when he identified that duplicating significant parts of the another published papers. These are some example statements. The articles contain several pages that have been copied from the PhD thesis entitled, the titles given, by the authors and citations without making any reference to it. That means this case is associated with plagiarism, and there are several pages which are being duplicated, and these authors can be the author themselves or another person. It can be due to the plagiarism or due to the self-plagiarism. Another statement sounds like this: the articles duplicates significant parts of other published paper, including the details of the papers are given. Let's say paper 1, paper 2, and paper 3. In this case, we know that the authors is actually duplicating the articles in various journals papers, and once this has been identified, you will expect the journals editors will communicate among different journals, and all these papers, including this paper, will be retracted together. Another reason that an editors-in-chief will retract the papers is by using the data of others without acknowledgement. This is an example. There is a strong evidence that the primary data published in the papers could only have come from the thesis, and the authors has made no acknowledgement of the work of that particular researcher. That means they find evidence that the data being published in the papers was actually obtained from another person's work without giving acknowledgement, and this has already violated the ethical practice. Therefore, the editors-in-chief decided to retract the papers. Next is publishing articles without permissions of some co-authors. The example is the first two authors, which is author 1 and author 2, have submitted the articles without informing the third author, author 3, and added his name as a co-author without his permissions. In this case, the third author do not wish his names to appear in the paper or disagree with the publications of the paper. Therefore, it is very important for us to publish a paper and getting the permissions from all the co-authors. The next one will be quite a serious case, which is manipulations of the peer review process. Based on the statement here, the acceptance of this article was based upon the positive advice of at least one fake reviewer report. the report was submitted from fictitious email account which was provided to the journal as a reviewer suggested by the author during the submissions of the paper. You know that before our papers can be published, it will have to go through a rigorous peer review process. And normally this peer review process is conducted in the double-blind method, where the authors do not know who are the reviewers and the reviewers also do not know who are the authors. This is so that the reviewers and the authors can act and respond professionally with the journal publishers to facilitate the entire process. This peer review process is very important. It is a way to ensure the qualities of the papers, getting the reviewer who are expert in the same field to review and decide the quality of the papers and give recommendations to the authors for editing, as well as give recommendations to the journals whether to accept or to reject the papers. And normally some good journals, they would like to widen their database. Upon submissions of the papers, the journals will request the authors to suggest some possible reviewer for the papers. And the journals have the right to choose whether to use the reviewer provided or to find their own reviewers to review the papers. In this case, these journals also ask the authors to propose some reviewers for his paper. And the authors suggested the reviewer, which is most likely himself, from a fictitious email account, and it is known as the fake reviewers by the journal. That means in this entire process here is the author who wished to submit a paper trying to manipulate the reviewer process so that his papers can easily get through for the publications. Now, the journals have published the paper based on the reports of the fake reviewer and found that those reviewers are actually a part of the manipulations of the peer review process. With that, the editors-in-chief decided the papers being retracted. This is obviously a serious unethical practice, and we should not involve ourselves in such an awkward situations. If you are so desperate wishing the papers to be published, it is either for you to improve the qualities of your papers or trying some other journals after the papers is being rejected. You cannot submit papers to several journals at the same time. Normally the journals do not allow that. You will have to submit for one journal, waiting for peer reviews results, whether it is accepted or rejected, and based on the comments of the reviewer, you may improve your papers and seeking for chances of publication. If it ends up to be rejected, then you can relook into your papers, see if there are any ways to improve it, and try for another journal's papers. I guess that is the ways that you can continuously improve your quality of the paper, and you will learn through the process. Only with continuous practice of submitting, editing, improving the papers, you are able to produce better quality papers and increase your chance of being accepted. There is no point for you to manipulate the peer review process. And worst case, if this being caught by the journals and these statements being put out there, these accusations will follow you until the end of your career, because it gives people impressions that you are really unethical. Not being ethical in this manner may not also be trustable in other responsibility in the institutions. Next is due to the questionable peer review process. This case is quite identical to this. However, there is slight difference between the two. The statement sounds like this: the acceptance of these articles was partly based upon the positive advice of two illegitimate reviewer reports. Although purportedly real reviewers' account, the editors have concluded that these were not of appropriate independent reviewers. In other words, the evidence is not strong enough to conclude that the reviewer is made of the authors who have submitted the paper himself, but the reviewer seems to be inappropriate and not independent. Therefore, it is considered as questionable peer review process, which is related to the credibility of the outcome proposed by the reviewers, which may be or may not be due to the manipulations of the authors. Next is the unethical issues. This is an example statement. The author has in this instance failed in his ethical responsibility on the grounds of reporting standard, failing to prove originals and accurate account of research, plagiarism, copying substantial part and claiming the result from the researcher from an author, and the details of the articles are given, and acknowledgements of source, failure to obtain permissions from the institutions, and the constitute unethical publishing behavior and is unacceptable. That means there are several reasons of this. There is a doubt in terms of the originality of the research and plagiarisms, as well as not provide proper acknowledgement of the source, and therefore the editors-in-chief decided to retract the papers. Next, let us look at the research community as the requester to retract the papers. This is normally related to the complaints. The example statements are here. We were notified through journal publisher of a complaint that the papers published in this journal and journals have significant overlap. Then, upon receival of the complaints, the publisher decided to retract the papers. It is noted that all these statements was quoted from the journals with the retracted papers, and the details in the brackets are made anonymous, as the purpose of these videos is not to penalize anyone. It is just to demonstrate different reasons of the papers being retracted from the journals.